What's up, everybody? It's Spencer Alessi, and this is the Esports Narrative. Who is Brayden Wilmoth? How do you go from one esports team to multiples? How do you get into esports as a player or in management? What factors have contributed to the rise of esports? How can the volatile nature of esports be smoothed out? What's the most important thing that prevents new esports organizations from crashing and burning early on? Hello, hello, hello. Good morning, good evening, good night. Welcome to episode 40 of the Esports Narrative. I am your host, Spencer Alessi, and this is the podcast that's all about the exploration of competitive video gaming and the passionate communities that make it so exciting. Tonight's guest is Brayden Wilmoth, the founder and owner of Rockets Esports. He was previously with Method. He's a seeker of talent. He's an occasional Twitch streamer. He is at A Potent Beast. That's A Potent Beast on Twitter and on Twitch. His team, Rockets Esports, has teams in PUBG, World of Warcraft, Arena, Call of Duty, and Overwatch. And I am super excited to have him here tonight to talk about documenting the journey of starting a professional esports organization. And I am really pumped for you all to hear this episode because we go into a lot of different subjects, cover a wide range of topics. So without further ado, let's get into the show. But anyways, we've been talking on Twitter. I remembered to hit record this time. Both mic inputs are good, so we're good to go. Brayden, super excited to have you here. We've been engaging a little bit on Twitter back and forth, and we both in DMs and stuff like that. After getting familiar with what you're doing, we thought it'd be cool to have you come on the show and talk about esports and what you're doing. So just super excited to have you, and thank you for taking some time tonight.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for having me on the show. I actually came across the show a couple of weeks ago when I announced I was doing my own podcast on social media. Came across the Esports Narrative and instantly became a big fan. So I'm honored to be part of the show. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, welcome to the family of guests that I've had on the show. You're guest number 39 or 38, 39. Depending on. Okay. 38 because I did like a recap video or episode where I was on another podcast. So technically I've had 38 guests, but this is this will be episode 40. So actually I've had 39 guests. So a little bit of a, esports narrative history.
You've been doing it for quite some time then.
It'll be almost 4 months this week. So I'm just super excited and it's been great. So I appreciate the support and all the the sharing and stuff like that on Twitter. It's super awesome that people are enjoying it and sharing it, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, congrats on the 4 months. It's a big achievement.
Thank you. So I want to dive right in with your story. I want to help people get a sense of familiar of where you come from. Like, what's your origin story? Like the quick, where you grew up, how'd you get into video games, and then how did you discover esports?
Okay. Yeah. So I grew up in the cornfields of Indiana, literally in the middle of nowhere. I got into video games because I was 12 years old and literally had nobody around us. We had to drive like 5 miles for the nearest house. So I had a computer, thankfully, had something with dial-up internet. And I would just download random games. They're usually the 2D top-down games and would play the heck out of them. I was so interested in it that I would actually become a programmer because of it. I love video games so much. I was like, okay, if I can buy these games and I think they're okay, why not just make my own games that I want for myself and go from there? So ever since, 12, 13, I was just like totally immersed in the video game world. So fast forward till now, I played some competitive games. I played Overwatch competitively for a little while. But other than that, it was just like being part of the scene was so special. There's something special about esports that just captivates me, keeps me in tune with everything else, and I love being part of it. And I knew as soon as I stopped playing Overwatch competitively, I didn't want to leave. So kind of worked with Method for about a year, knowing full well that I wanted to start my own esports organization afterwards. So after about a year with them, I decided to stop and start Rockets Esports from scratch.
Awesome. So your career background then is in development and programming and stuff like that?
Yes. Actually, right now I'm the director of software engineering at a medical software company. That's my day trade, but nights are kind of devoted to esports.
Awesome. So that's really interesting to me because I always like to hear that story of like, are you full time? Are you like still working on your day job and doing this? So it's an interesting perspective to hear, I think, for the people listening, because there's a lot of people starting their own teams or their own organizations and trying to, pave their own path, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I want esports to be a full-time thing eventually. But I'm kind of on the boat where I want to be the last one in the organization to be paid. So I'm not doing it for money. I'm doing it kind of to help everyone else in the scene elevate themselves. So one day it'll be a full-time gig, but until then, I got to have some self-sustaining income.
For sure. And I think that's smart. It's obviously wise. And you're obviously not one of the big brands that is getting invested by these major sports franchises. So that being said, and this is good advice for new teams starting up, is like, you have to have your ducks in a row. So I'm curious, why did you start your own organization? Obviously you spoke to, creating this brand in esports because you love the competitive side of it and stuff like that. But why did you start an organization, and kind of tell us a little bit, how did Rockets Esports come to be?
So I started an esports organization because I kind of wanted to have control over what games we were in. It's really cool working for esports organizations, but sometimes you just have those passion games you really, really want to be a part of. For me, it was Overwatch. And as soon as Method left Overwatch and the entire scene altogether, I kind of knew right then and there it was my turn to take a step back and start something for myself. And that's what Rockets Esports is I wanted to be part of Overwatch. There was nothing going to stop me. I knew I wanted to start an esports org anyways. So it kind of just panned out in the right ways. But Rockets Esports kind of came from a little bit of planning while I was with Method. I mean, I knew I wanted to do it, right? So I started planning it a long time ago, getting some branding set up, working with some close friends on some logo designs and stuff like that. Really just kind of grinding it out slowly, day by day, articulating all my thoughts and trying to put a brand together before actually executing. But yeah, that's kind of how it all started.
So I'm curious if you're willing to share, like, what did this look like when you were starting? Like, did you have a lot of money in your savings account to like start this and launch this in contract teams? Like, if you care to share, obviously I don't expect you to share specific things, but like, how did you get this off to the ground and, get a couple teams going, and how did that all work? Like self-funded, like, do you have investors, like co-owners and stuff like that? Tell us if you care to share like a little bit how that looked starting out.
Absolutely. I mean, I think everyone deserves to know, especially in esports, we have to be transparent if we want to grow. So I'm a firm believer that esports organizations grow in kind of like a stepping stone, like a steps and tiers. So you start off with a free organization. You put a little bit of money into branding. You self-invest into it. Not a lot of money, but a little bit of money, get a logo and stuff. And then you get some free teams. You get some teams that you don't pay salary, but you kind of try to pitch them a jersey or some things here and there to kind of incentivize them to represent your brand. Once you get those teams, and hopefully you're a good kind of scout and recruiter, you want to get teams that are like on the cusp of being on the next tier. So for us, when we got the Overwatch team, we knew that they had a lot of potential and they would be a good representative team for the organization to help us grow. We're not just going to pick up the first team that came to us. So I think the first part is self-investing, getting a free team. Once you get a free team and you're starting to get results, you're starting to get exposure, then you can kind of bring on some like either a small investor or pitch to small sponsors, get a little bit of whether it's product or whatnot. For us, we brought in a couple of product sponsors. We first had Razer, we had Gunner, we had Twitch, and we had OW Kings, all representing us. And then we brought on top of that, once we got those sponsors kind of hooked, we brought on a personal investor. And the personal investor we still have to this day. He's a 50% owner in the business. but he invests, he pretty much pays the salaries of all of our players and all of our teams. So right now we have 2 World of Warcraft teams that are salaried. We have a Call of Duty team that's salaried. And we've had a couple other teams previously, like PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds and stuff like that. So we kind of he self-sustains the business from an income standpoint, and it allows us to pick and choose kind of what sponsors we want moving forward. I think the next step for us is to get the right sponsors that are going to invest monthly, some kind of sum of money to self-sustain us and our teams, but allow us to have our personal investments go to like a team house or something, a content production team, something to help us grow to the next tier. It's all about taking it, in my opinion, in very small steps.
Yeah, it's a really interesting perspective. I like that perspective, and I'm curious, what's the next step for you? And you mentioned the stepping stone, and you got this personal investor, and you're making strides to bring on teams that are going to be able to get you to the next level. So is that the next step, just looking and scouting for teams that are maybe undervalued, so to speak, and pay them a competitive rate and have them perform and do well in these tournaments? Like, what's the next step to get you to the next point?
I think the next step for us, and looking at our goals for 2018, my personal goals for 2018 is to really invest in content production. I think that's kind of where things are going to be at. So for us, it's going to be getting a team house with a dedicated studio room and maybe someone to be there to produce content with the players. Maybe when the players wake up, get a quick interview from them, post it on social, stuff like that. We really want to push our brand with our players. And I think for us, that's kind of the next step.
What platforms are you looking for to create content on? Obviously, you mentioned on social you're going to do a podcast, which I think is super awesome, really awesome. What other platforms are standing out to you of where you want to start putting out content and creating stuff for those platforms?
That's a great question. I mean, I think Twitch is already doing great with content production. Just getting our players to stream more to start with on there is great. Second of all, maybe we want to do some more videos, like content guides. Like if you're playing World of Warcraft, hero guides for everyone. We want to make stuff like that. But I think one of our kind of interesting ideas we're toying with going into 2018 is how do we integrate something Snapchat-esque into esports to help kind of bridge the mainstream media to esports. I want to make players more relatable right now. And for me, in my opinion, there's a severe gap. You can't really relate easily to players unless they're like huge phenoms of some sort. But even then, it's kind of hard to get like a heartfelt message from them. So I want to have, and if everything works out, our players will be posting, a video a day. Like, here's a day in the life of me here. I scrimmed 8 hours. I went across the street, got some food, came back, hung out with the guys, played some pool. Like, I want to make it personable, and I want people to be able to just look at them and see what they do and how dedicated they are. Give them kind of like a glass window into the life of esports a little bit more. So we are going to be making our own kind of social stuff, like our own app. We're going to be integrating some social features into there, posting a lot more videos into our Twitter, our Facebook, our website, stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that's really cool because, Snapchat they mentioned just recently that they're going to be redesigning their app and they're going to be investing more into that to make it more user friendly and stuff like that. In just the demographics alone with the age group on there, I think that's a super cool idea. And, if you guys pull it off, I think it could be really powerful for your brand for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And personally, for me, it's not just about pushing our brand forward. As a person, I just want to push esports forward on some front. Like, I feel like there's a big opportunity on mobile devices for us to connect esports fans to their esports brands a lot more than we do now. So if there's something we can do to help push esports towards mainstream media, that's kind of where I'm going to be focusing my efforts. And whether it's through my own personal brand or whether it's through Rockets Esports as an organization, I don't really mind testing the waters on both. But that's kind of like what all of 2018 is about right now.
So your first team was your first team the Overwatch team? Tell us a little bit about that and how did that happen? Like, how did you get that very first team? How did that happen?
Yeah, so the first team was our Overwatch team. There was a player who was previously on Method, which when I was when I was part of Method. After Method dropped the roster, this person had formed another team already, and I had a good rapport with him and a couple other guys on there. So we were talking, and we kind of just made it happen. I think it was largely due to the connection I had and how I'd worked with the person before. So it kind of just naturally worked out.
So you had like a pre-existing relationship and you're like, hey, you know, let's figure something out and work together. And it kind of just from the relationship kind of manifested from there.
Exactly. There was a lot of trust into it, I think.
Because I think it's important. Like these amateur teams that are starting out, they've got a logo, they've got a website, they've got really good, you know, design and branding all over their Twitter, and then they're like looking for a team, and they pick up this team, and you know things start to go down from there. Whereas you guys have a good story in that you picked up a team, you know, they're starting to make some headway, and you pick up another team, and you're seem to be on the right track here. And I've seen so many just like looking on Twitter that have gone down such a bad path. I'm curious is how that first one started, and then how'd you get the next one? You know what I mean?
Yeah. So the first one was, and I think organizations overlook the value they bring to the team. Like a lot of people see it as, oh, the team will come to me and I'll just give them, you know, a jersey. But for us, when it came to the first Overwatch team we picked up, we really worked really hard with them. For me, I knew a lot of people in the Overwatch scene, so I worked really hard on the contacts we had to make sure that they had tier 1 scrims at all times. This is at a time where a lot of tournaments were still ongoing with Overwatch. There wasn't really a disparate scene of T1, T2. It was everyone kind of fighting it out. So we worked hard with all the big organization names to make sure we had a consistent scrim schedule with them. And that was kind of our value bring to the entire deal, is to just make sure we had staff to support them to play at the highest level. And then I think from Overwatch going into the other games, it started to just come to us. And we had a lot of people on staff who had experience in these other games and knew what they could bring to the table as well. And it just kind of worked itself out. So we brought on the 2 World of Warcraft teams. We have a lot of World of Warcraft fans in the org.
So,
and yeah,
I think this is interesting because I think what you did is really smart. And just to kind of like summarize this or put it in a way that's digestible, is like you were working with Method. You built up relationships, you built up this network of people that you acquainted with and stuff like that, and you put in the work for Method and you create those relationships. And then when it was time for you to go out on your own, you had some of those relationships and those people to call on. So for everybody listening, this is the power of networking, right? Like, can you speak to that? Like how powerful it is to create relationships, even if you think there's nothing to gain from it in the future, right?
I think you should never think that there's nothing to ever gain from it. But you should also not think that there is something to gain from it either.
Yeah,
you should always do something. Yeah, it's weird. It sounds weird when you say it, but I honestly believe that just do things for the good. But networking is so powerful. When we started off Rockets Esports, we had 200 followers on Twitter, but we were already sponsored by Razer, by Gunner Glasses, and by Twitch, which if you look at esports orgs that small, you will never see an esports org that has that kind of backing. That was all based off networking. You know, we would go into these conversations and these talks, and it's not just for sponsors, it's for teams and players too. But you have some clout, you have a little bit of rapport already built. You have a message that resonates with everyone. And it's a lot about who you know, but it's a lot about, you know, what kind of story you can tell with it as well.
Yeah, which goes back to the brand, like you were saying earlier. You built up the brand from the Overwatch team and getting other teams on. You've built up your brand, and you know it's become respected, and it's helped you move forward with other teams.
Exactly.
So what's the appeal for WoW? Like, obviously Method, I mean, when you think of World of Warcraft, as far as teams go, Method is by far like the first name that comes to mind, right? So I get that, but what's the appeal for you in Rockets Esports, and why is WoW, particularly WoW Arena, so interesting for you from an organizational standpoint?
That's a great question. To me, I love Blizzard. I love Blizzard games, and I love Blizzard esports. When I look at WoW, I see a game that is lacking in organization support, and I don't know why. I know why to an extent, but it's so exciting to watch. It's so exciting to be a part of, but to see like half the teams go to BlizzCon without an org representing them is kind of like, I'm kind of taken back by it. I wanted to do what I could to help support the scene. I mean, coming from Method, I became a big fan of watching arenas. And when these teams know you and these teams come to you, and they have such a humbling story as well, and they're such good guys in esports, and they just want to have a home. It's hard to say no. I just couldn't look at WoW and say no, we shouldn't ever go into it, and be one of those orgs that just skips over it too.
Yeah, because Blizzard is crazy. Like, particularly World of Warcraft, I think it's one of those games. It's one of the few games I think has a little bit of star power. Like, Blizzard could do something. It could change the game a little bit and tweak it, and then it could be like 11 million subs in like that again. Like, yeah. I really think World of Warcraft has that power, and it's going to be one of those cases where the organizations that are in it and supporting it are going to be the ones that have kind of the clout or the stability to be like, yeah, we were there for the whole run, and now we're here with the game, and I think it has that ability.
It does, and honestly, what they have planned for 2018 is huge. I like how active they are. They're not a very passive esports team. They want to keep improving. They want to keep pushing it forward, and for me, that's something I want to be a part of.
Yeah, and for as much hate and trolling that they get on their message boards about like the PvP changes and like how much like garbage there is in response to like tweaks and changes, it's like to put up with that, like they must have like the good of the game in mind. Like if it was self-serving, they would have been done a long time ago.
Absolutely. And just a quick shout out to them. The Blizzard WoW esports team is literally the best esports team we've ever worked with. They're amazing people.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the GCD TV, and I know that some of the people from that, or all the people from that, went to work for Blizzard and are now working with the MLG to run the tournaments and stuff like that and run some of the esports stuff. So definitely props to them. I think the broadcast this year was better than ever. All the tournaments were better than ever. So I really think WoW is doing really good right now. I'm excited for the future for them.
Oh, me too. Me too. Next year's going to be big.
So I'd be remiss if I didn't hit on this, because I was just thinking about it when you mentioned Overwatch and the teams. I'm curious from your perspective, why keep an esport or a Overwatch team right now with the OWL and contenders and stuff like that? What's the reason you're keeping an Overwatch team, and how's it look like going forward for you?
So right now it's kind of in a slow space or slow spot. We want to be a contenders team. I think that's our ultimate goal. We're kind of waiting for Blizzard to announce more things or give a clear path, stuff like that. But for us, we want to be the contenders team that interacts and interfaces with the Overwatch League team. So if an Overwatch League team, at the first split or at the end of the first season is looking to replace some players, we can be like, hey, look at us. We've got some great talent and we'd love to help you out. We want to be the kind of the bridge between the two scenes. We also want to be a powerhouse in contenders. It's just kind of a question now if, how do we get into contenders and what do we have to do to make everything like that happen? And hopefully soon Blizzard will announce all of the details, but for now we don't really have much to go off of.
Yeah, I think it's going to be exciting to see how these smaller organizations like Rockets, like what you guys are doing to develop these teams, and if the team kind of carries you, like if the team makes contenders, how that helps you and helps your brand and stuff like that. I think it's going to be really interesting, and I'm super excited to see how that works for you guys and other organizations as well.
Yeah, me too. I think Overwatch And like the hype around the first season is going to be great. To see all these scenes come together and have these tiered scenes again. Hopefully we'll reinvigorate Overwatch competitiveness again. I have hopes for it. I have high hopes for it.
And Blizzard, among the top three, like Valve, Riot, and Blizzard, have the most money. They have the most backing of any other game developer ever, like in the world, other than like Tencent, which is part owner of, which owns Riot, right? So Blizzard has a lot of money that it can invest in it. And when it sees an opportunity like this, I think it's going to be interesting to see how much effort they put into not only the pro, like the OWL, right, but the contenders and the developmental leagues. You think they're going to like push hard on that?
I think so. I think they're going to, they don't want to see it fail, right? So they're going to do everything they can to make it the best it could possibly be. I don't know what their exact plans are right now, but I'm like anxiously waiting on the edge of my seat to see what they're actually going to do. Yeah. I mean, I'm excited that the first week of preseason of Overwatch League is going to be happening this week. That's cool. And then the season starts in less than a month or about a month or something like that. That's really cool. Like, I want to see how they execute the first year. But to know the trajectory it's going to go in, and to know that it's going to go from just everyone being in LA or whatever, to going to the cities and traveling and like bringing people out of their homes to see esports, that's going to be exciting. That's going to be a game changer.
Mm-hmm. I'm really curious for this next question I have for you is like, you mentioned that you still work full time and you run the organization. What's a typical day look like for you?
Oh, a typical day. I wake up and I look immediately at emails and Discord. I usually have a handful of messages on each. Reply to everyone. Take a shower, go into the office. During the day, I reply to everyone that messages me as quickly as I possibly can. I never want to keep people waiting, so I'm pretty active in esports even during the day. Get home, eat dinner, and then it's just esports all night. We have meetings, we have business meetings, we have team meetings, we're planning trips, we're talking to sponsors, we're putting together pitch decks. There's so much work that goes into running an esports org. It's so hard to even like wrap my brain around how I find time to do it. This is kind of part of the reason why I'm starting the podcast that I'm doing, called Running an Org, because I want people to know what all it takes, like what things that people usually don't think about that they should be thinking about if they want to start an org or be part of an org and stuff like that. But it's a lot more of the business side of things more than anything else.
I think that's super interesting. I think it's really, really cool that you're going to be documenting the journey, right? Because Rockets Esports started in 2017, right? When did it start?
Say February.
Okay, so February of this year, right? So still very young, but you still had some good successes along the way, and it's going to be cool to see someone document the journey, right? Somebody that has some bigger name sponsors, somebody that has some investment in their organization, somebody that's above the ranks of the amateur teams that are like 14 guys all living in an apartment that have co-owners and stuff like that. Not to take anything away from that, but it's a big step up from that. It's going to be cool to see you document that, and I for one am excited. And part of the reason why I wanted to talk to you was to like flush some of that out and talk about that stuff, and because I think that part of the industry is really cool, and I don't see someone doing like a daily documentation. Now there's people doing some stuff, but with that said, like I think it's gonna be cool.
Right. I think it'll be cool as well. I get a lot of people messaging me asking how a pitch deck looks, or how do you interact with sponsors or approach a sponsor, everyday kind of questions that you would deal with running an organization. And that's exactly what I want to do. I want to document it personally, and I want to bring in the biggest names in esports, like the CEOs of these different esports organizations, lawyers, professional athletes, investors. I want to bring them on as guests and kind of talk to them, so people don't think that they're just getting my opinions. They're also getting a professional on that topic's opinions as well. It's going to be really cool.
And it's good for you too, right? Like it helps you get another perspective, somebody that in the industry, and kind of pick their brain a little. I mean, that's why I did this podcast is like, I don't have experience in esports, like the industry itself outside of playing video games, competitively growing up of like Counter-Strike and playing in leagues like Cal and ESEA and stuff like that. But as far as the industry goes, like I don't have any experience yet. I just started this podcast and I'm bringing on guests that have industry experience so I can pick their brain, right?
Well, now you're 4 months in and you probably know a lot more now than you did before.
A little bit.
No, it's a great way. See, you're the kind of go-getter, like starter kind of personality. You just did it, man. You went out there and did it. And there's so many people in esports that are just like kind of reluctant to dive into something. And I don't know why. I mean, that intrigues me in my mind. Like, I just want to know why people hesitate to jump. And you creating this podcast is great.
Yeah, and that's a really good segue into my next question, which is actually I outsourced some questions online to some people on Twitter, and this one came from at PBN Justice TV. So shout out to him. And he said, "How do you get into esports, either playing or management?"
That's a great question. I think to get into esports playing, you just have to play. I mean, play. Let's take Overwatch for example. You just play ranked a lot. You get to a place where you think you're really good with a handful of heroes and you're comfortable with them, and then you just like go onto these Discord channels and ask to be part of scrims. That's the one thing that I really, really dislike is when all these players come to me and they're like, I have this MMR on ranked in Overwatch, but I can't get on a team. And I'm like, well, ranked is cool, but where it's really at is when you scrim with these other teams, you scrim against big teams, scrim is where all the experience is. And it's so easy to dive into a scrim. Like there's so many Discord channels where people are just looking for someone to sub or fill for them. Take every opportunity you can. And I think that's the easiest way to get into it. You'll learn a lot about comms. You'll learn a lot about teamwork. You'll learn a lot about the heroes that you think you know already. And then from there, you'll just be kind of stick out. I know you'll scrim a bigger team. The bigger team will be like, this guy's really good. We need him. And they'll pick him off and it just keeps going up. You have to grind your way to the top.
Yeah, that's really good advice. It's like anything else, right? It's like you can read and watch videos and learn about playing Overwatch as much as until you're blue in the face, but until you get on the field, quote unquote, and practice and train, that's where you develop, like you're saying.
That's exactly it. And that's where I can't understand that players don't take the time to do that as much as they should.
So management, if you want to be administrative staff or be a coach or some other management type of role in an esports organization, how do you do that? How do people get involved with like Rockets? Like what are you looking for to make it like a value of people listening in? Like what do you look for in people, and like in general sense, how do you do that type of thing?
So I'll tackle this from two perspectives. The first perspective is how I did it. I was actually a competitive player on a team. And I took that team. I realized I couldn't grow as fast as I wanted to as a player. So I would be a better team manager than anything else. So I kind of just took a step back, managed the team, and kept getting better players than myself onto the team, and then pitching them to an org and get a lot of clout. Because when you get clout by just interacting with the right people, the people that are already in the scene, asking them questions, just staying on their radar. Even if it's just to say hi, like it doesn't take much. And then it's really easy to become a manager in esports. Like when something opens up, they'll be like, oh, I remember this really cool person who had some experiences they shared with me, and they'll just go from there. Another way to do it is to just recruit your own team. It honestly doesn't take much. Organizations like Rockets, for example, we ask for what kind of experience you have. Some of them have no experience, but they have like professional experience doing something totally different. Like if a school teacher came to me and was like, I want to be a manager of the team, I'll be like, okay, what kind of perspective do you come into the game with? And, being a teacher, you have skills of how to teach, how to like take feedback and convey it to everyone else. That's a key skill that a lot of people in esports don't have. So it's just like pitching yourself in a way that makes you stick out from everyone else. Like, why does your outside skill make you more valuable than everyone else applying?
And like you said, there's skills that you can draw on that are not like esports skills. Like you don't just, go out and Google and like, how do I get skills in esports? It's like, yeah, it's like you said, it's like communication and teamwork and, time management and organization, right? Like these are all, skills you learn in life.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't have to come from esports. It can come from anywhere.
So how big is Rocket Esports? Like, what does your team look like as far as management and player? Like, what does it look like size-wise?
Yeah, so we have currently we have 2 World of Warcraft teams. We have a Call of Duty team. We have an Overwatch team, and then we have a designer. We have I think our staff is probably about 8 people. We really like to make sure we have adequate staff to work very closely with all of our rosters. Anytime they have a question, we have an answer for it immediately, or a designer to make whatever they need immediately, or a video editor to really do anything. So that's about 8 staff, 4 teams. Yeah.
So I know that your Call of Duty team is playing in CWL, right? So how excited are you for that?
Oh man, I'm so excited. It's gonna be so good to see them play like in a LAN environment. These guys have a lot of experience. Everyone on the team comes from bigger orgs than Rockets, so it's going to be exciting to see them represent us in Dallas this weekend.
And I heard that this CWL Dallas event is going to be probably like the largest Call of Duty event like in recent years,
ever.
Right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. This is going to be huge.
Yeah, like the people that I follow on Twitter and like the people running it at MLG and stuff like that have all been tweeting out like all the ticket sales and stuff like that, and it's like how many teams are registered, and from what I gather, it's going to be insane.
It is going to be really insane. I'm so excited to see everyone and how hyped they are for the event. It's going to be really cool.
Yeah, it kind of makes me jealous that I can't go to it, because it's going to be like, if there's one Call of Duty event that you go to, like outside of championships, like this might be the one that you want to go to.
This is the one. This is definitely the one. Now, I'll be excited to see if the follow-up CWL events and the qualifiers are as big as the Dallas one. But to have Dallas be the one that kickstarts it all this year, that's going to be sweet.
Yeah. So a little bit deeper of a question. What's been the most important thing for you that's prevented you from kind of crashing and burning so far? Like I mentioned earlier, I've seen a lot of amateur teams kind of fall by the wayside for a number of different reasons. But what's been the reason for you that things haven't crashed and burned yet? Just starting in February, I understand, but like, what's the reason for not crashing and burning so far?
I think that's a great question, and I was not prepared for that at all. But I think for me, it's just not letting failure be an option. Like doing whatever it takes to keep things going. Well, I think one of the big reasons we've stayed successful for most of the year is our staff. Some of the best staff in esports. These people are so selfless, willing to do whatever it takes. It's incredible. We try to give everyone in the organization an opportunity to succeed, whether it's if they want to be with an organization that's bigger than us, they're just looking for us to help them. We're more than happy to do that. We're not looking to lock people down. We want to see people reach their goals, their dreams. And I think that message resonates with them when they come aboard, and just gives them a good feeling, and they're motivated from the very beginning to make great things happen. So I think it's just like finding the right partnerships, whether it's in business or in staff or in teams, to make sure you're not set up to fail. So we don't let toxic players come in. We don't let toxic staff in. It's just making sure you're creating an atmosphere for everyone.
Yeah, it's smart, right? Have you had any bumps along the way? Like, I'm curious if there was ever a point, like since you started this, and or maybe even since working with Method and things like that, are there any days you've woken up, or any times you've been like, man, I don't know if I want to do this anymore? Like, have there ever been a time where you were gonna like throw in the towel, be like, forget it, I'm not gonna pursue this, like I'm done?
Never. Zero. I mean, throwing in the towel is that's the easy way out. And I don't think there's no reason for me to ever want to do that. I get to wake up and see people playing video games to keep themselves like in a house or alive or whatever, and that for me is amazing. Like I would never give it up.
Where do you think that comes from? Like, you think it comes from just gratitude and like, you know, it's awesome to be alive and have this opportunity. Like, where does it come from for you to have that sense of, you know, like that sense of responsibility to continue pursuing what your dream and what you want to do?
I came from literally nothing. I built everything I have. I worked my ass off to get to where I am, and I'm in a really, really good, comfortable spot right now. And I want to see people be as happy as me. So if that's through video games, which is something I love, then hell, fuck, I'll do whatever I can for them.
I like it. I respect that for sure. Respect the heck out of it.
Yeah.
You recently had a streamer of your team. I think it was I don't know how you say it, but it's Cupcakes.
Cupcake, yeah.
Or Cupcake. So you had a streamer that was featured on the Battle.net launcher. Like, that was super cool for your organization, I'm sure. Like, what's the importance for you for streamers? Like, why do you have streamers, and like what's the value there to you and to the streamer? Like, what's the value exchange?
For us, like, let's take Cupcake for example. Cupcake was our very first streamer we ever picked up. When we picked her up, she was probably around 20 average concurrent viewership, which is really good. Like, some streamers wish they had that number. She was crushing it. Her quality was out of this world. So I brought her on because I was like, this person has a lot of possibilities and a lot of great things that I'm looking for. What we could give back to her was our partnership with Twitch. She could immediately, even though she only had 20 concurrent viewers, she could get a sub button, and these loyal watchers could start subbing to her and helping her have a sustainable lifestyle as a streamer. So that was kind of the initial, for all of our streamers, kind of the initial give from us. But then from there, it's just like, these people just crush it. They go on every single day, and you have to be on to perform in front of 20, 50, 100, 4,000. There was a time we had Cupcake on the Twitch front page, and she peaked at around 4,000 viewers.
Wow, awesome.
I mean, that's incredible, right? I mean, going from 20 in less than a year, getting to the 4,000 mark, and then getting on the Battle.net launcher, and on the first day on Battle.net, getting over 100. I think she had 110 subs day one, like new subs.
Yeah, I saw that on Twitter. That's so cool. Yeah, that's so awesome.
It's incredible. It's incredible. And for me, it's just getting to see that success story happen and be part of it somehow. But for them, it's like they're living out their dreams. They get to hopefully fast track some things, and working with an org, we can kind of help make things like that happen.
So do you plan on having more streamers and like developing kind of a team of streamers? What's that look like for you guys?
I think it's all kind of dependent on what Twitch is looking to do. I think they're kind of changing up the rules on how streamers can be signed to organizations in 2018.
Okay.
I want to keep, when it comes to our current streamers and how we had it set up, is we would have kind of one streamer focus on one game and not have a lot of overlap, because we didn't want to like just be part of one market where everyone already saw us. We wanted to have like a good handful of games that we could really draw people into the brand.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a small group. It wasn't something that took a lot of management on our part. It was kind of just they're just brand ambassadors essentially.
Right. Is there something that Twitter has, or not Twitter, is there something that Twitch has shared when it comes to that? Because I know there's a lot of organizations that have like hundreds of streamers, right? Like, there's just a massive amount of streamers. Like, is there something that they've come out publicly and said that, like, you know, guidelines or rules or anything like that?
I'm not sure if they came out publicly with anything, but we've had some calls with them. What they've told us essentially is, moving forward in Q4 of 2017, so now even, they're not looking to give organizations credit for non-competitive players. So they have to be signed on a competitive roster for their viewership minutes to count towards any kind of incentives that Twitch may offer an organization.
Gotcha.
So yeah, it's kind of, it's shifting a little bit from anyone who streams to, hey, you have to kind of like be competitive.
Right. So this is another question from PBN Justice TV on Twitter. How do orgs make money?
It's a great question. I think the number one way orgs make money is from sponsors. Usually, it really does range on how much money a sponsor will give an organization, but you can look for between like 1,000 to 5,000 for a medium-sized org per sponsor. Some really large orgs charge like 10,000 just to represent a sponsor a month, by the way. So a substantial amount of money comes from sponsorships. Another avenue of revenue is prize money. So esports contracts are kind of structured like, I'd say generically, it depends on the game a lot, but generically it's an 80-20 split. 80% of the winnings go to players and 20% goes to organizations. And it's not for organizations to get rich. It's we take a risk on investing in these players to pay their salaries. It's sometimes nice to get, a break even back or even a little bit more back to pay for the staff who spends their time, their nights, their mornings, their days, even full time, letting things operate the way they do. I think there are a couple other great ways to make money that, will be tapped into as years come up. I just had a really good conversation with someone today who works with investors who just threw the idea at me of like, hey, why not have a team house or a warehouse where after school kids come and they pay like $100 or $400 a month to just, sit, do their homework. And when they're done doing their homework, play some video games with these pros and interact with them and bounce questions and ideas. And if you're charging, it's a great idea, right? And it helps bring, first of all, it gives parents a break. Their kids are going to play video games anyways. Why not get them out and social? And then it brings mainstream people into the know of esports. And then it gives you from an organization standpoint, a different piece or type of content to produce to show the world what you're doing to give back. And I think there's a lot of great, and I think that's one example of a lot of different types of revenue sources you could possibly have in esports that haven't really been tapped into quite yet.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. It's like after school program or even a before school program. I think that's really cool because since I've been looking at esports and like meeting people and talking to people, I've always thought like, okay, you got the well-known, ways that organizations make money, but there's got to be ways that we can get creative and like have additional revenue streams and like thinking and brainstorming about that. I think that's a really cool idea.
Yeah, I think so too. I think there are a lot of more untapped ideas like that out there. And it would be nice and refreshing to see esports kind of shift in a way that is less traditional and just relying on sponsorships and finding more self-sustaining routes to have that kind of income.
So this has kind of been a hot topic in the esports industry, over the last several months, and it relates to the player salaries. Do you think the player salaries should be public? Do you think there's value in that? Is there not value? What do you think?
It's always a tough topic to touch on, really. I think they should be. I mean, no matter what, esports is so small. You can find out if you really tried. You could talk to, if you know the right people to talk to, it's not hard to get it out of people. I don't mind it being public personally. I think it keeps things competitive and healthy. But from a business standpoint, I could see, you don't want to reveal, because it's not always all about the salary, right? Sometimes it's about, do they offer a team house? What kind of product sponsorships do they have? And when you just look at the number of salary, like that's not the full story. I don't know. That's tough. It's really tough.
And it's volatile, right? And that leads kind of in the next part. But as far as salaries go, it's a volatile, like the market is very volatile. It depends on a lot of variables, like you were mentioning. The game doing well one year and it like declining in popularity the next year. So hence supply and demand, the salaries are going to go down because the game isn't as popular. Like it's very contextual, and it's one of those things where, there might not be a right answer to it.
Yeah. Exactly. And
Not,
salaries also come salaries come from where your sponsors should
right.
be at. Well, like we're not going to go into Scuff Gaming and be like, "Hey, Scuff Gaming, do you want to invest in us and be a sponsor?" We have no console games, right? So, it kind of depends, and that's a like drastic example right there. But where your sponsor focus is as well, you have to take that into consideration, and how many teams you want to have, how much money you have. It's dependent on a lot of factors.
Yeah, and I hate to be a fence sitter, but like this is one of those things where it's like it's not clearly, I don't think there's a clear answer to it. And I always think about like being a fence sitter and like trying to appease both sides, and like if you try to appease both sides, you please neither, like that kind of thing. But just
yes, it's tough. It's a tough thing, and I think as esports grows, it'll be much more public knowledge. It'll be like, basketball players have public salaries and stuff like that.
So we know that esports is still pretty volatile. It's a volatile industry. It's a volatile market. Do you think, how can the volatile nature of esports organizations be smoothed out? And do you think that, do market forces eventually just teach people the difficulty of forming and running a business the hard way, or is there a better learning process? And this question comes from Twitter, and it comes from Bill. He is @LearningBill. So kind of an interesting, unique angle to this volatile esports industry question.
Yeah, that's a good question, Bill. I think the first question, and just how the volatile nature of esports can be smoothed out, I think the answer to that is just time. It's still new. It's still new to so many people that it's going to be volatile until a lot more people know about it, and a lot more people are knowledgeable of the inner happenings of how things work in esports. A lot of orgs like to keep their secrets, tight to the chest. So you don't know how to do something, or a new investor and a new organization comes in and they overprice a team, and then it bumps the team salaries for all these other teams. Like, there's so many factors into it. I think it's just time. I think it's just people becoming educated in the space. But I think to the second question about running, what was the difficulty of forming and running the business or whatever?
Yeah, like, do you think it's just market forces that are going to teach people like how it is, or is there a better learning process?
I think there's a better learning process. I don't think we should let the market, like, the market's never wrong, right? So that's one way to do it. But I think the better way to do it is to bring more business people into esports. I think there's a severe lack of business people in esports, because it comes down to when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, esports is a business. When you have an organization, it's a company. You run it just how you would pretty much any other company. Right now we have a lot of people coming to esports. They have no business background. They don't have a lot of, there's so much you have to know about business to run it successfully. If you don't have that background, it's going to be really hard to learn it and pick it up, and be successful from the very beginning. I think one of the things that needs to happen is if you want to start an org, or if you want to, be a part of an org, bring on a business partner. Like, bring on someone that went to business school. And they'll bring some interesting takes. And even if they don't know anything about esports, they're still going to have like their own kind of ideas of how to make it work. And I think I want to see more of that happen.
So what factors have most contributed to the rise of esports?
The factors that contribute to the rise of esports, I think there's so many of them. I think, first of all, gaming already being big, like, you just go home, relax, play video games. That's cool. Now you're at work and you want to see how other people are playing that same video game. So you get on the Twitch, and which, first of all, I think Twitch is probably the most explosive piece of esports growth. Getting to just watch it from wherever, to learn from it, to grow from it. Like, the availability of watching video games while you can't play is huge. But also, people love doing this, right? It's just like you open up your favorite game, you play for 4 hours, and then you look at the clock and you're like, what the fuck just happened? Like, it's just like, it's so fun. And I think it's that, because it's fun, more people like it. They like to watch it. They like to play it. They like to try to be competitive. And that's just, as younger people come into gaming and esports, we're just going to see this become way more popular over time. And that's, but if I had to boil it down to a single thing, I'd say it's Twitch.
Yeah. So over time, as far as like a financial perspective is concerned on the industry, what do you think esports looks like in the future from a financial perspective? And is that going to increase the divide between the professional organizations and the amateur organizations?
100%. I think in 10 years, I think the Overwatch League is onto something when it comes to city-based teams. I think in 10 to 20 years, esports will take over the NFL. And that's a bold statement. A lot of people will disagree with it. I don't care. But when that happens, these cities and these investors and sports teams are going to buy out local sports organizations, kind of like the Overwatch League has already done. And it's going to be really hard for tier 2 teams to compete with the amount of money those kind of investors have. But there's going to be a clear, distinct tier 1 level. You're going to have these arenas, whether it's a small arena or a big arena, to come watch your favorite teams. And a lot of the small orgs won't be able to supply those kind of like fun things that people would love to have.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's a big debate whether localization is good for esports or not, because esports by its nature is global. It's like the internet, like anywhere you have a connection, you can contribute to the community and play. And there's a lot of debate back and forth whether it's valuable for to foster the locality of esports or not, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. I'm curious, what are your opinions on local esports teams?
I think it's absolutely fundamental.
Yeah.
I think it's absolutely fundamental. I'm forgetting who mentioned this the other day on Twitter, but I've been talking about it a little bit. I had a guest on last week, Jay Duncan from Kansas City. He runs a lot of the KC Game On in Kansas City. They just had a big event. It starts local, like it's the same thing with traditional sports. Like it starts local, it starts young, and you get people involved in it from a young age. They develop a love for it, an infatuation. They grow up, they become parents, they pass it down to their children. I mean, it's just how I see it working out the best. And from a longevity standpoint, I think that's what will help esports continue and be the behemoth of an industry that it is by fostering the local communities and supporting them with professional organizations that have money to spend on stuff like the after school programs and fun stuff like that, and like the outings and like all sorts of cool stuff that you can do if you just have a little bit of money, a little investment.
Exactly. And right now, I think one of the big pain points for parents seeing their kids playing video games is like, they just want them to get out of the house. They want them to be social. They don't want them to just like close the door and not talk to them for 6 hours a day. But if you have these local organizations and you have these arenas that they can come to and be part of a social in-person scene, that's going to help bridge the gap from mainstream media to where esports is going to be in the 10 years. It's just going to bring people out. It's going to help. It's going to help, like you said, it's going to help the growth.
I'm curious in this because we just talked about a lot of stuff that's like going to help esports grow, or what we perceive and what we think will help esports grow. What do you think the esports industry needs to continue to grow and be successful?
To continue to grow and be successful, I think going back on my other point, it has to have smart business people. We need to have people take these organizations, look at it from just a business perspective and in the right mindset, and execute on what they learned in business school, and then mix that with an advertising agency or something like that. The biggest way for esports to grow is to make it hit home, whether it's taking kids out of the home to interact with these people and these players, and making it something that they can do every day, or at once a week. There's so many, like my brain is racing because there's just so many ways. Like I think first, business people. We need business people. We need advertisers that can bridge the gap between homes and video games, so it's not, the stigma to video games isn't as bad as it is. And then just places where kids can go to play competitively or learn how to play video games and interact with the social community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so true. I mean, it's the tried and true stuff.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I just want to open it up. Like, any last thoughts, shout outs, like, let's have it.
Oh man, on the spot. Shout out to everyone that follows me on Twitter, everyone that works for Rockets Esports, that supports Rockets Esports. And just a shout out to tune in next year. I'm going to have my own podcast called Running an Org. Please continue to listen to this one because this one's an amazing podcast.
Thank you.
But if you have continued interest in esports and how to run an org, check me out on Twitter at apotentbeast, and I'll have some updates on there.
Yeah, definitely. We'll make sure we link up your Twitter, Rockets Esports Twitter. Make sure we link up everything in the show notes and in the description of this and wherever it's posted, and iTunes and Spotify and Google and all that. Make sure we link up everything.
Yes,
and
yes.
I'm definitely excited to hear and like watch and see the guests that you bring on, and like kind of talking about the journey and the struggles and the triumphs and stuff like that. I think is really interesting. So I'm excited for you to start that, and I wish you and Rockets Esports continued success in what you guys are doing, and it's super awesome to see what you guys are doing. I'm always following and trying to keep up with people who are doing really cool stuff, and you're one of the ones that I think is doing some awesome stuff, and wish you continued success doing that.
Thanks, and best of luck to you, and again, happy 4 months, man.
Thank you very much. And with that, I just want to remind everyone that if this all goes as planned, this show is just the beginning. Hey guys, real quick before you go, I just want to say thanks for listening and supporting the show. It really means a lot to me that you like it, and I hope that if you found some value from this podcast, that you'll share it on Twitter or on Instagram or Facebook, anywhere that you have a social media presence. I would love it if you would just share it with 3 to 4 people that might be interested in it. It would absolutely mean the world to me. It would help me get my name out there, help me get the podcast out there. I do this solely for the love of esports and for the love of getting to know people and hearing the stories of esports that I think are so awesome. So please, if you got value from this, if you enjoyed it, please share it with someone who you think might like it. And with that, I will see you next time. Thanks for listening. I really appreciate it.